Welcome, seeker of the unknown. In the depths of the wild, where nature hides its darkest secrets, there are tales that defy explanation. Tonight, we share 4 eerie, true camping horror stories that challenge reality. As the clock strikes 3 a.m., the line between what is familiar and what is unexplainable blurs into relentless terror. Imagine a moonless night where every rustle of the wind whispers ghostly secrets and every shadow hints at something unseen. Ordinary campsites become stages for inexplicable encounters, where anonymous souls have faced horrors that echo through time. These are not the fantasies of an overactive mind. They are accounts of moments when the wilderness revealed its sinister side. Voices murmur in the dark, movements defy logic, and sights disturb the very fabric of reality. Prepare to journey into a realm where each detail is a clue, and every shiver reminds you that the unknown is closer than you think. If you dare to listen, your descent into the heart of fear begins now. Story 1. The Midnight Whispers. The night was mercilessly cold, the kind that gnawed at the bones and made the air feel heavy with something unseen. The wind howled through the dense wilderness like a wounded animal, carrying secrets too dark to be spoken aloud. A small group of campers had ventured deep into an isolated clearing in the forest, far from the last traces of civilization. They had come seeking adventure, the thrill of nature, and the camaraderie of firelit stories under a starless sky. But as midnight bled into the abyss of the witching hour, something began to shift. A presence, an unseen force that had been waiting for the perfect moment to make itself known. At first, there was only silence. A silence so profound it felt unnatural, as though the entire forest had paused to listen. The usual sounds of nocturnal life, chirping insects, rustling leaves, distant owls, had vanished without warning. The absence of sound was deafening, pressing in on them from all sides. And it was then that the first whisper slithered through the air. It was barely audible, a faint murmur carried on the wind, threading itself through the trees like a sinister melody. One of the campers, who would never forget what he experienced that night, woke with a start, his heart hammering in his chest as though he had been ripped from the depths of a nightmare. He sat up, his breath forming thick clouds in the freezing air, his ears straining for any sound that might confirm what he had just heard. For a moment, there was nothing, just the suffocating quiet. And then the whisper came again. It was closer this time, not one voice, but many. Indistinct, fragmented words, spoken in a language he did not understand. The sound curled around the edges of his consciousness, growing in intensity, yet remaining just beyond the realm of comprehension. His skin prickled with an overwhelming sense of dread, a primal fear that told him he was not alone. Summoning a courage he did not truly possess, he unzipped his tent with trembling fingers and stepped out into the darkness. The forest was still, too still. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the fire, which had been roaring just hours before, had been reduced to smoldering embers. His breath hung in the air like a ghostly mist, dissipating into the black void around him. But what unsettled him most was the feeling, an invisible weight pressing against his chest, an unshakable certainty that something was watching him. Then movement. At the edge of the clearing, where the shadows were darkest, something shifted between the trees. A silhouette, tall, gaunt, and wrong. Its form flickered in and out of existence, as if it were not entirely bound by the laws of this world. The whispers grew frantic, their volume rising in a crescendo of sorrow and warning, as though the very air was begging him to flee. His pulse thundered in his ears as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing, but logic had abandoned him. He reached for his flashlight, his frozen fingers fumbling to switch it on. The beam was weak, trembling with the unsteadiness of his grip, but it was enough to illuminate the figure standing just beyond the reach of the light. It had no face, no discernible features, just an empty void where eyes should have been, an abyss that devoured the very light that touched it. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure dissolved into the night, leaving only the echo of those tortured whispers. The camper stumbled backward, his breath hitching in his throat as a wave of nausea and terror gripped him. He turned and bolted for his tent, diving inside and zipping it shut as though the thin fabric could protect him from whatever lurked beyond. He lay awake for the rest of the night, listening, waiting. The whispers did not return, but the silence that followed was far worse. When the first rays of dawn broke through the skeletal trees, he emerged to find his companions already awake, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. He wasn't the only one who had heard the voices. One by one, they recounted similar experiences, the whispers, the feeling of being watched, the shadow moving through the trees. None of them had seen what he had, but the fear in their voices confirmed the truth. Something had been with them that night. They packed up in haste, leaving behind the remnants of their camp as if eager to erase any trace of their presence. As they trudged back toward civilization, the wind picked up once more, carrying with it a final whisper, so soft it could have been mistaken for the breeze, yet so clear it sent ice through their veins. It was laughter. To this day, none of them speak of what happened in that forest. Some believe they had encountered something ancient, something that had been there long before them and would remain long after they were gone. Others convinced themselves it was just their minds playing tricks, the isolation warping their senses. But deep down, they know the truth. The wilderness has secrets, and some whispers should never be heard. Story 2. The Last Campfire. Deep in the heart of an untouched forest, far from the artificial glow of city lights, a group of friends gathered around a crackling campfire. The night was crisp, the air tinged with the earthy scent of damp leaves and burning wood. Laughter filled the clearing as they swapped stories, weaving tales of haunted roads, vanished hikers, and forgotten legends. The firelight flickered, casting distorted shadows against the looming trees, their gnarled branches stretching like skeletal fingers toward the night sky. Time slipped away unnoticed until, at precisely 3 a.m., an unnatural stillness settled over the group. The once comforting glow of the fire seemed to dim, its warmth waning as though siphoned by an unseen force. A strange hush descended upon the forest. No rustling leaves, no chirping insects, no distant howl of the wind. The silence was suffocating, pressing down on them like a heavy fog. Then the fire shuddered. The flames flickered erratically, their erratic dance mimicking a desperate struggle against something unseen. And then, without warning, a gust of wind surged through the clearing, snuffing out the flames in an instant. The darkness that followed was absolute. For a moment no one moved. The black void swallowed them whole, stripping away all sense of direction and safety. Then came the sound, soft at first, distant. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and measured, approaching from the depths of the forest. The observer, the one who would later recount this tale, felt his pulse quicken. He strained his eyes, searching the shadows for any sign of movement, but the darkness yielded nothing. The others huddled closer, their breath visible in the now frigid air. Fear clawed its way into their bones, cold and relentless. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint, barely distinguishable from the rustling of unseen leaves, but they grew, layering upon one another like a chorus of lost souls. The murmurs carried no discernible words, just a sinister cadence that made the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. One among them, a friend braver or perhaps more reckless than the rest, stood. He took a hesitant step toward the tree line, his silhouette barely illuminated by the distant moonlight, and then he saw it, a figure. It stood motionless between the trees, just beyond the reach of the dim light. Its shape was human, but there was something wrong. It moved without sound, its presence unnatural, its posture too rigid, its head slightly tilted as if observing them with unseen eyes. The air grew colder. The whispers crescendoed. Then, without warning, the figure stopped, and it screamed. A sound unlike anything human tore through the stillness, a mixture of agony, rage, and something unidentifiable. The group clamped their hands over their ears, the sound drilling into their skulls. Like jagged ice, the observer, hands shaking, fumbled for his phone and lifted it to record. The dim glow of the screen barely illuminated the figure, but in those brief flickering moments, he saw it bathed in an eerie, spectral glow before it vanished into the void of the forest. The unbearable cold pressed against them as they scrambled. For their tents, their every instinct screaming at them to flee. But even as they zipped themselves inside, the terror was not over. A new sound filled the night, a slow, rhythmic tapping. It was neither a knock nor a natural rustle. It resonated through the ground, through the very air they breathed, as though something unseen was drumming its fingers against the fabric of reality itself. Some later claimed it sounded like a heartbeat, others like a distant, otherworldly drum, counting down to something beyond their comprehension. None of them slept that night. When dawn finally bled across the horizon, they emerged from their tents, their faces pale, their bodies stiff from the cold and fear. The fire pit remained as they had left it, cold and dead, yet the ashes bore strange, spiraling patterns that none of them remembered creating. They left in silence, their belongings, hastily packed, an unspoken agreement never to return. But even as they walked away, one of them, the observer, could not shake the feeling that they were not alone. That something, somewhere in the trees, was still watching. Even now, when they speak of that night, their voices lower instinctively, as if afraid that whatever had found them in the forest might be listening still. Was it a ghost, a spirit bound to that place? Or something far worse, something waiting, lingering, drawn to the flicker of flames and the sound of laughter in the dark? No one knows, no one wants to find out. Story 3. The vanishing trail deep in the heart of an ancient, uncharted forest. A seasoned camper known only as the Wanderer embarked on a long, anticipated journey. Accompanied by a small group of adventurers, he sought the thrill of isolation, the peace of untamed nature. The dense woods stretched endlessly around them, their towering trees forming a green cathedral untouched by civilization. Yet the forest held secrets. Secrets that would unravel as the clock struck 3 a.m. At first it was nothing more than a whisper, a rustling among the leaves, too measured to be the wind, too rhythmic to be the stirring of animals. The group pressed on along the winding path, their laughter masking the growing unease creeping into the wanderer's mind. He couldn't shake the sensation that something unseen was moving with them, mirroring their steps just beyond the reach of their flashlights. Then the trail itself seemed to shift. Paths they had memorized only moments ago twisted into unfamiliar directions. The reassuring markers they had left behind, scratches on tree bark, stones arranged in deliberate patterns, were gone, as if erased by unseen hands. Panic gnawed at the edges of their minds. The once familiar woods had transformed into an impenetrable labyrinth designed to confuse and consume them. As they hesitated, straining to decipher the shifting terrain, a new sound emerged. A slow, deliberate shuffling, heavy, inescapable. The wanderer turned his camera toward the shadows, heart hammering in his chest. His hands trembled as he adjusted the lens, capturing fleeting glimpses of movement. A silhouette, tall and motionless, stood at a fork in the path, watching. The group froze. The figure did not move, did not breathe, yet the oppressive weight of its gaze pressed against them like an unseen force. One of the companions whispered a prayer under his breath. Then, as if acknowledging their fear, the shadow melted into the forest, swallowed by the darkness between the trees. They pressed on, moving faster now, yet every step only deepened the forest's hold on them. That was when they noticed the markings. Symbols, etched into the bark of ancient trees, glowed faintly under the pale moonlight. The wanderer traced, one with his fingertips, feeling the grooves burned deep into the wood. It was no language he recognized, more a warning than a message. Then came the moment that shattered their fragile grasp on reality. A cry of terror split the night as one of the companions stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. A fire pit, long extinguished. A backpack, unzipped and spilling its contents. A journal, pages torn and scattered by the wind. The logs, still arranged in a circle, bore the imprints of people who had once sat there. But where had they gone? The scene felt recent, untouched by time. And yet there was no sign of life. Only an overwhelming silence, thick and suffocating. The air grew heavy, charged with something unseen. Then a crash. Something massive barreled through the undergrowth, its movement unnatural, its presence undeniable. The camera's lens caught a fraction of it. A shape, blurred yet horrifying, shifting between the trees faster than any human could move. The wanderer's instincts screamed at him to run. Chaos erupted. They fled, their footfalls uneven, breath ragged with terror. The forest stretched on, endless and merciless. The path they once followed had dissolved into confusion, their desperate escape leading them deeper into uncertainty. The whispers returned, no longer carried by the wind, but spoken directly into their ears. Names, warnings, echoes of the lost. Finally, just as the first light of dawn began to stain the sky, they stumbled back to their original campsite. Gasping, trembling, they huddled together, unwilling to speak of what had transpired. It was then that they made a silent pact to leave and never return, to let the forest keep its secrets. Yet the wanderer was not free. Even now, years later, when the world is quiet and the shadows stretch long, he hears it, that slow, deliberate shuffling, the whispers that call his name. And when the clock strikes 3 a.m., he knows the forest still remembers him. Some trails are not meant to be followed, and some who vanish are never truly lost. They are merely waiting for others to join them. Story 4. Echoes in the darkness, deep in the heart of an ancient forest, where the trees stood like silent sentinels and the shadows stretched long under the pale light of the moon. A group of friends set up camp in a secluded clearing. The location was idyllic. A peaceful lake shimmering under the starlit sky, the soothing rustle of leaves carried by the cool night breeze, and the distant hoot of an owl adding to the wilderness's charm. They had come for an escape, to share stories, laughter, and adventure. But as the night deepened, their excitement would turn to dread, and their adventure into a nightmare. It started subtly, so much so that at first none of them paid it any mind. A whisper, faint and unintelligible, drifting across the surface of the lake. It was easy to dismiss as nothing more than the wind playing tricks, a mere illusion born from the quiet solitude of the forest. But the whispers persisted, soft, murmuring voices carrying no distinct words, yet filled with urgency, as if unseen figures were warning them of something unspeakable. By the time the clock neared 3 a.m., the air had turned frigid and unnatural, a chill seeping into their bones despite the still-burning campfire. The laughter had faded, replaced by an eerie silence, each friend exchanging uneasy glances as the whispers grew louder. It was then that one of them, known as the Seeker, decided to find the source of the voices. Armed with only a flashlight, they stepped cautiously towards the water's edge, the others watching with held breaths. The lake lay still, impossibly still, its surface like polished obsidian reflecting the gnarled silhouettes of the trees. But the whispers, they did not stop. They grew in volume, now mingled with something else, an undercurrent of weeping, distant yet filled with sorrow. The seekers' heartbeat thundered in their ears as they peered into the water, half expecting to see something unnatural staring back. But there was nothing. No ripples, no movement, only an abyssal darkness stretching into infinity. Then, a sound, not from the water, but from behind them. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crunching against the forest floor. The seeker turned sharply, the flashlight's beam trembling in their grasp. But no one was there. The trees stood motionless, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The air was thick, oppressive, pressing down like an unseen force. And then another step, closer this time. Panic surged through the seekers' veins. They stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a rock, their breath hitching in terror. Without hesitation, they turned and ran, the flashlight's beam bouncing wildly as they bolted back toward the campsite. But even as they ran, the footsteps continued, following, pacing them, but never closing the distance. When they reached the safety of the firelight, the others could see the sheer terror etched onto their face. But before they could ask, the whispers returned, louder, closer, now accompanied by something more sinister. A soft tapping, a rhythmic, metallic tap, tap, tap against the fabric of the tents, like skeletal fingers drumming in anticipation. Then the unthinkable happened. The fire flickered violently before extinguishing in an instant, plunging them into total darkness. The only source of light was the frantic beam of the seeker's flashlight, swinging wildly as they tried to locate the source of the tapping. It was everywhere now, on all sides. One of the friends, shaking with fear, reached for their phone and hit record, pointing the camera towards the tent entrance. For a brief second, through the grainy night vision of the camera, they saw it, a shadowy figure pressed against the thin fabric of the tent, its form amorphous, shifting, as though it was not bound by the laws of this world. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. The phone's screen distorted into static. A piercing screech filled the air, a sound so unnatural, so filled with malice that it sent them all reeling. And then, silence. The fire reignited on its own, casting trembling light onto their pale, horrified faces. The whispers had ceased. The tapping had stopped. The presence, whatever it had been, had vanished into the void from which it came. By dawn, they had packed in haste, abandoning the campsite. Without a second glance, no one spoke of what they had seen. No one dared to explain what had happened. Even as they drove away, the fear clung to them, an unshakable certainty that they had not left the forest alone. To this day, the video remains, glitch-ridden, distorted, but undeniably real. And when played at just the right volume, beneath the static, one can still hear the faintest trace of a whisper, a warning, a plea, or perhaps an invitation to return. In the dark of night, when the world sleeps and the shadows whisper their secrets, these stories remind us that the unknown is never far away. Each chilling encounter from 3 a.m. serves as a reminder. Sometimes terror lurks where we least expect. It and the wilderness holds mysteries that defy explanation. As you return to the light of day, let these eerie tales linger in your mind. Remember, every rustle of the wind, every flicker in the darkness, might be a glimpse into a world beyond our own. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, and if the unknown calls to you, then join us on our journey into the heart of fear. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your own experiences or theories in the comments. Your voice is part of the mystery, and together we can keep the darkness at bay, or perhaps embrace it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, remember, the night is alive, and it never truly sleeps.